5 and 5. Stand in respect. Over the past 3 years, a major controversy has gripped the NFL and even spread its influence beyond to other sports, professional and amateur alike. The controversy to which I'm referring, of course, is the 2016 U.S. National Anthem protests, which are still continuing to this day. These protests were started by 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick during that 2016 preseason. These protests include professional athletes kneeling before the national anthem in protest of, 1, racism and police brutality, and in some cases, the policies of President Donald Trump. Now, as these protests continue to this day, tensions have been heated on both sides, with the President Trump himself weighing in on the issue, stating that any NFL players that kneel before the flag should be fired. My name is Tyler Shaw, and I am here to tell you that these protests are both disrespectful and unpatriotic, and these professional athletes should have to stand before the flag. Now, before we begin, what you must understand is that kneeling before the flag is a form of deviance. Deviance is defined as any ideas, traits, or actions that go outside what society considers the norm. There are 2 types of deviance. The first being formal deviance, which breaks any rules or laws society sets down, and the second being informal deviance, which breaks any unwritten custom or code that society may have. These protests are interesting in the fact that they started out as a form of informal deviance, as there were no clear rules stating that these players had to stand for the national anthem. Organizations like the NFL and the NBA stated in their guidelines that players should stand for the national anthem, but they were not required to. And the MLB, for instance, states that standing before the flag is a time-honored tradition for both fans and players, and that everybody should stand before the flag. But after these protests started, many of these professional organizations changed their policies now that so they could require their players to stand before the flag. Now, as I stated, these official policy changes can be seen here, and for example, in May 2018, the NFL changed its policy to require all players to stand for the anthem, and those who chose not to would be required to stay in the locker room until it was over. The NFL changed its official guidelines, stating that players, coaches, and trainers are to stand and line up in a dignified posture along the sidelines to stand for the flag. And finally, National U.S. Soccer requires all players to stand respectfully before the flag during the national anthem. Now, as Americans, it is these players' right to protest, but kneeling before the flag is both disrespectful to the country, military, and men and women who died to defend it. And most importantly, in my opinion, these athletes are paid professionals. Okay, they work for very large national organizations, and playing sports is their job, just like me and you have every day. It's not just a game. If these organizations, their bosses, whoever is telling them that they are required to stand for the national anthem, they should do so, as that is what they're being paid to do. Fans don't go watch these games to see these rich millionaires protest the flag. And I also believe it's very unprofessional to hold these protests while you're at work. And lastly, if these athletes want to use their status to champion their cause, they should do it on their own time, not when they're on the job. So, in review, all professional athletes should be required to stand for the flag, as it is disrespectful to the country because, number one, kneeling before the flag is a form of deviance, and in this case, a form of informal deviance turned into formal deviance, as now, leading to my second point, the NFL, NBA, U.S. Soccer, and many others require these players to stand before the flag. And these players are paid professionals working for these large organizations. If they're told to stand before their flag by the bosses, then they should have to do so. And lastly, there's a proper place and time to hold these protests, but your job is not one of them. All right. Alright, that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.